I think we really underplay the importance of managers. When we look at an org chart, where we really spend a lot of the time and the energy at is the top. We spend time thinking about the directors, the VPs, the C-suite. And are all those individuals important? Sure. They're driving the strategy, they're having the conversations with the shareholders, they're having the conversations with the investor relations individuals out there. Yes, they're doing really important things. They're putting together that strategy. But the strategy doesn't happen there. The strategy is actually delivered through managers and supervisors. So they're kind of that mighty middle, the first line to making all of this stuff happen. And I don't know that we give them the time, the energy, a lot of times the development that they really need, especially off the bat. Managers really have a massive impact on the day-to-day work of people, but also really a massive impact on them emotionally. Taking on the responsibility of being a leader is a pretty big thing, similar to when you become a parent for that first time. It's not all about you anymore.
Ryan, I'm really excited to have you here. It's been great to get to know you through Cielo Exchange, and now you're coming out with a book, Quick Bites of Insight. And so what a good time for us need to be connecting with you on all the things about management. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks for inviting me. It's awesome.
Awesome. Well, what I liked about the fact that you're writing this book on management and leadership now is that, as I talk to a lot of leaders inside organizations, whether it be L&D or just people in the business, I hear a lot of the frontline and the middle managers really being crunched, being the linchpin for driving transformation, getting the work done, but they're being asked by so many people from the team and top down. I think ways to support them is really important. So I love that I can dive into this topic with you today.
That sounds great. Yeah, and that's a big part of why I wrote the book. So you're kind of hitting the nail right in the head there. That's a big part of why I wrote it.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in here. And maybe the first thing to ground ourselves in is, why do we think managers are so important? Of course, we conceptually sort of understand it, but I want to hear from you, because you actually mentioned to me last time we chatted, you think we underplay the level of impact that managers have on people. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that from you.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we really underplay the importance of managers, because I think when we look at an org chart, where we really spend a lot of the time and the energy at is the top. We spend time thinking about the directors, the VPs, the C-suite. And are all those individuals important? Sure. It's important. They're important. Yes, they're driving the strategy. They're having the conversations with the shareholders. They're having the conversations with the investor relations individuals out there. Yes, they're doing really important things. They're putting together that strategy. But the strategy doesn't happen there. The strategy is actually delivered through managers and supervisors. So they're kind of that mighty middle, the first line to making all of this stuff happen. And I don't know that we give them the time, the energy, a lot of times the development that they really need, especially off the bat. One of the places at the CLO Exchange, I constantly hear this over and over and over again from people in the last couple of years is this idea of, well, we need to get back to basics. Well, what that tells me is, if we need to get back to basics with managers, what did we not do in the beginning to really help grow and develop them? So I think we need to be giving those managers the time, the energy, the focus, not only I think when they first become a manager, but even as they grow in their time. Just because somebody's been a manager for 10 years doesn't mean that they aren't dealing with new challenges. Management looks so much different today than it did 5 years ago. I mean, every day it's changing, it's shifting. So people are going to need to have to grow and kind of level up their skills at all times. But I think we have to give them the time and the energy. They also, just because of their role, because of where they are in an organization, they have a massive impact, a massive, massive impact. Like when people become managers, or when individuals are managers of individuals, again, this is people that are helping make those decisions on a day-to-day basis. The directors, VPs, the C-suite, wonderful people, important people, they're not working with your average person. The average person may never meet the CEO or may never meet somebody from the C-suite. I remember when I worked at Monsanto, I think I met the CEO once, and it was in an elevator with his wife. I'd seen him speak, but I've never actually spoke with him before. But there was 20,000 people in that company. And that's not weird for somebody to maybe never meet some of those individuals. But that day-to-day person, that leader, is really the one that's driving what is their experience in that organization look like. It's so, so important. Managers really have a massive impact on the day-to-day work of people, but also really a massive impact on them emotionally. And that's the thing maybe we don't talk about enough or a lot. Taking on the responsibility of being a leader is a pretty big thing. It's kind of like taking on the responsibility, to me, of becoming a parent. Because like when you're, single, or maybe you are a dink like myself, like you've got double income, no kids, got a wife, you got both of us. We don't necessarily have to worry about the challenges that come with necessarily having kids. But once you become a leader of people, similar to when you become a parent for that first time, it's not all about you anymore. But that also means that you have a lot of damage that you can cause. Just like, if you raise your kids maybe the way that you think they should be raised, or there's a real opportunity that you can cause some damage, or you can at least cause some emotional hurt there. And I think same thing when it comes to kind of being a leader. So couple stats that I pulled just to kind of let people know how important this is, and like
Yeah.
why leaders have such an impact on people. One, so Sherman 2025 said that 40% of employees cite poor leadership as a top reason for work stress. And this one is even more important to me, but the Workforce Institute in 2023 said, hey, leaders impact employees' mental health more or as much as their spouse. So that was at 69%. More than doctors, more than therapists, more than family members, other family members, more than your mentor, more than your coach. Like your leader has as big an impact on your life as your spouse does in most scenarios. And so when someone has that much of an impact on someone's life, we've got to prepare people for that. We've got to prepare people for the responsibility that I think comes with becoming a leader. It's a
Yeah.
lot. And sometimes people don't know what they're getting into.
For sure. And I definitely feel like becoming from a team leader, individual contributor to a manager was the hardest transition I made in my career too. And actually the instinct of like what makes you a really great individual contributor can actually be very counterproductive as a manager too. So I think there are things that are just like not very linear in that transition and not very obvious, which I think segues very well to maybe talking a little bit about what's the difference between a great manager versus like a good manager versus a bad manager, right? What I would love to hear is now that you've written this book that really like dissects insights around management, what are the top three most counterintuitive insights from your book that you've uncovered around what makes a great manager?
What really kind of separates good managers from great managers? I've been working with managers for a long time now. 22 years I've been in HR. The last probably 15 to 12 have been really focused on leaders and leadership development, organization development, talent development. And I definitely noticed as I wrote my book, I didn't write it to necessarily say, here's my 4 themes that I'm writing in my book. But as I got towards the end of it, I started really dissecting it and saying, like, what's in here? And what did I actually say? Like, where did
Yeah.
all of this came from, of course, my experience over the last 15, 20 years of doing this. But I think there's 3 things that kind of maybe are a little counterintuitive that people wouldn't think, especially if you're a newer manager, that you'd be like, oh, well, this is how you show up as a good manager, that I actually think can maybe kind of keep you with that good manager, but not necessarily make you great.
Yeah.
So the first one that I've noticed as I looked through the whole book and looked at it kind of with this bigger view was great managers don't solve everything. I think we have this expectation that a great manager solves everything. Like they know every little thing, they know how to solve everything. They're the hero that can come in and jump in and save the day at any scenario in any situation. And is there some little bit of truth to that? Maybe. Like you want to be knowledgeable. You want to be able to help guide and develop your people and really help them when they are kind of in that pickle. But I think what often happens is a good manager, again, will say, hey, here's how I do it. And here's the way that I think you guys should go and do this. But I think a great manager is the one that says, you know what? Let me kind of remove the friction here, but really help you guys think better. Let me elevate your thinking. Let me show you how to think strategically. Let me show you how to think a little bit differently here. But giving them that flexibility and that openness to be able to do that on their own. I think that to me, that first one is, great managers don't solve everything. They have to kind of open up some space and give people that opportunity, sometimes to make some mistakes, but also just to learn and learn in their own way. Because if you just tell them how to do everything all the time, which I think a lot of people think that's good leadership, they're not growing. They're not
Right.
getting better.
Yeah.
You're probably not preparing your replacement so that someone can succeed you and take your spot at some point too.
There's one thing someone said recently that really brought what you said to life was to help people become a good manager, ask them the question, what would you need to do for you to become a redundant person on your team in the next year? Or so that you can walk away on a vacation for a month and the team would still operate like effectively. And that's a really interesting thought experiment to say, like, where am I a bottleneck? Like, how do I enable my people to be able to do their job? without me being like breathing down the neck or whatever. So I think that that was an interesting way to frame it. But anyways, yeah, please go to
I
the
mean, I
second.
love that, Vince. No, because I think that's the case. Like, that's when you know that you're a pretty good leader. When
Right.
you've got strong people that have good instincts, good judgment, you've given them the opportunity to use it, and you can walk away for a 3-week vacation and know that my kid's going to be fine.
Right.
Like, the world's not going to burn down while I'm gone. I think that's when you know you've done your job well. 100% agree with that. I love whoever said that. Agree.
Yeah.
100%. I think being nice is not the same as being effective, is the second one that I kind of see consistently throughout my book. I think a lot of managers avoid discomfort. They avoid setting expectations. They avoid being really clear with feedback. And they're doing it out of, I think, trying to be supportive. Like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to upset somebody. But the reality is that, great managers to me are clear, they're kind, they're caring. I think the big challenge, we hear a lot about human-centric leadership these days. And I am a big fan of human-centric leadership. I think it's important. I think a lot of times people think human-centric leadership means that you don't hold people accountable. I would disagree with that. I think a great leader understands how to balance accountability and human-centric leadership. You can't just be someone that always holds somebody accountable but does it with no emotion, like doesn't care about their emotions. You can't just be someone who's maybe, again, a pretty good human-centric leader, somebody that's got a lot of emotional intelligence, but isn't necessarily holding people accountable. So I think the real balance and the real greatness in leadership is, how do you find the balance in that? And how do you find the balance in yourself? Because most people probably lean towards one way or the other a little bit more. So how do you make sure that you've got the balance for yourself and for your team and for what they need?
Amazing. And then that one also, like nice is not the same as being, effective. What that reminds me of is one of my biggest realizations, I think, of me becoming a manager and a leader was saying I shouldn't try to be liked. Being liked actually was a real crutch that
Ribbons
diminished my
in
ability
the...
to be a leader, because the moment you're relying on likability to wield followership, you're no longer able to have tough conversations because you're worried about losing that one thing that gives you the followership. And in fact, the thing to aspire for was being caring but fair, so that you can be respected, so that you can be effective and still like lead people, but also have conversations that are constructive and not always positive and so on.
Yeah. I remember, I think the first person I led, like right out of grad school, after 2.5 years of doing almost everything in the organization, they gave me a part-time resource. And I think one of the biggest compliments she gave me was, look, you're tough, but you're fair. You never go over the line. She goes, you have a lot of expectations and you want us to meet those. And that's great. She goes, but you're always fair about it.
Yeah.
Like, and human.
Totally. Writing your book, have you seen like one practical change or tip that you see apply to like most managers that can make them instantly more effective on their job? I'm curious if there's anything that pops to your mind.
Yeah, there's probably one. So one that I put in there that I think is a big one for managers, and this is really probably for almost anyone, because I don't think we've ever been told how to do this well. And this sounds kind of crazy, and it sounds even maybe like, what? That's too easy, too simple. A really effective one-on-one. Like, I think most managers don't know how to have a good one-on-one because no one's ever really taught them. We take it for granted.
Right.
And if you haven't had a leader that's had a good one-on-one with you, you don't really know what good looks like here. So the way that I really talk to people about one-on-ones, Vince, is that right now, when I see some challenges around this with leaders, it's because it is so tactical. Like, that meeting, that one-on-one is 100% just about the tactics. It's about what's going on. You get in there. It's almost like a checklist. Like, how's this project going? How's this project going? How's this project going? And then that's it.
It's like a check-in,
And
daily stand-up, basically.
yeah, it's almost like a daily stand-up. They treating that one-on-one like a daily stand-up, which I appreciate stand-ups. I actually love Agile. Like, Agile is one of my favorite things. I like to think about everything we do in L&D as a product. So a lot of times I use the Agile process when I'm running big projects, and I do appreciate a good stand-up. But a stand-up is different than a one-on-one. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to look at that a little bit differently. I actually use the third method. So the first third, I usually like to set aside for, what does that person need? So a lot of times, sometimes people might hold on to something or want to have a deeper conversation with you or want your opinion on so that they can move forward on something. So I spend the first third of my one-on-ones really focusing on, what does that person need from me? The second third of that one-on-one is, what do I need from that person, or what information that I have do they need to know to make sure that they can do their job effectively? So I think that's the other piece of it. The third piece of that, I like to leave open for development conversations. Maybe something they did really well, I wanted to give them development feedback on. Maybe it's something on the other side that's a little bit more on the constructive side, but also an opportunity for them to give feedback to me. So like, because I want to make sure that I'm really showing up in the way that they need to be effective. Like, are there certain behaviors that I'm actually doing that are getting in their way? And I want to know that and have that conversation quite often. Now, you might not get to that third piece all the time, but I do like to make sure that that conversation's happening there. A lot of managers, I think, maybe don't see these one-on-ones as an opportunity to really build a relationship with the people, but they should be. Like, build a relationship. I think it's a great way to build trust. Again, whether you're sharing information that you might have that they might not know, or just listening to them and trying to help guide them or remove barriers for them that they might potentially have, or just getting them the answers. Like, maybe you can give them an answer to something that they don't have to worry about dealing with, and they can go and do what they need to do and keep moving forward on a project. Wow. So I think it's a great opportunity to get to know that person, get to know what's going on in their work life, get to know what's going on a little bit more in their home life as well. I think it's one of the best ways to build trust with somebody. I think if people can have better one-on-ones and more thoughtful one-on-ones, I don't care if you're a CEO or if you're a first-line supervisor and a first-time first-line supervisor, if you can do that well, I think your relationship with your people will do better. And you're going to find out what's really going on in your department.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. One of the things that I was telling our team, the leadership team, especially both in Sparkwise and before, is teaching folks or sort of letting folks know that, a really good one-on-one is an opportunity for you to show that you actually care about the person. Not like them as an employee that's being productive, like on your team, but the fact that you care another human being who is dedicating an important part of their life towards a same mission that you have. And it's an opportunity to show your humanity. And that's how you really build the kind of relationship and connection that can let you work more effectively together. And also when things go south, you can navigate that together. Talking not just about the work task, but talking either about their career and like long-term aspirations and or just like life, as you said, and understanding like what's on your mind, what are the things that are you excited about? Are you like worried about anything? I think are really important topics to cover.
100%. I mean, there's times as I'm having one-on-ones where we might not end up talking about work, where
Right.
it is really about they've got something they're struggling with. And maybe they need some guidance and need some help there, or they trust me enough to ask me that guidance and help in that certain scenario or situation, or I just need to be aware of it because maybe it might be impacting their work or could impact their work. And if I'm aware of it, I can help make sure that it doesn't. So sometimes you've just got to get real with people. I mean, especially like I think about during the pandemic, Vince. Like I remember my one-on-ones during the pandemic. Those were meaty emotional one-on-ones because people were struggling. They were struggling. I mean, and I literally had someone on my team that had like a mental health breakdown during it. Like she was having some real struggles mentally. I had to really think about those one-on-ones differently. I was there to support them through, I think, a really rough time that a lot of us were going through.
For sure. Yeah. Maybe shifting gears to role you've had as a learning leader inside organization, helping develop employees at scale. And one of the things that you've thought a lot about is, well, how do you develop managers and develop leaders at scale, right? First, maybe what are the top things you've learned over the years and ways of developing managers that actually work?
Yeah. I really look at everything as a bigger, broader learning ecosystem too. So that's a place to start. Is that yes, programs are important, but I think programs are only part of the bigger key. But sometimes when people think about what we do in learning and development, especially kind of business people, they might think about, okay, well, you're going to come in and do this 1 hour training and everything's going to be fixed. That's not how things work at all. So, I mean, you have to really look at everything as a bigger, broader learning business ecosystem. I have this mentor who's told me like, hey, think about businesses as an organism. And organisms are always constantly changing. And so that kind of helps me think through some of those things. From a learning and development perspective, what's worked? What have I found like is helpful from a learning and leadership development perspective, especially that leadership development side? I think one, simple and focused. And this has been a big one for me. I really like creative and practical when I'm really working with people. So I don't want to get too crazy. Do I know all the research on the back end? Yes. Do I want to really bore people in the room with the research? No, I don't. A lot of them don't care, depending on the organization that I'm at. They don't care about it in the way that I care about it, or you care about it, or even maybe some of the people that are listening to this podcast care about it. But how do we keep things simple and practical? And I mean, they can leave, think about it, reflect, and start tackling and thinking about it differently that next day. How do I actually go back, put this into practice, and start showing up a little bit differently? So for me, simple and focused. Let's not get crazy with it in L&D. I think, people don't have the appetite for that. People don't have the time for that. And I think simple and easy really helps people kind of just take it in and be able to go back and do something with it. So I think that's a big one for me. Building habits with the managers. So, I've run all these different leadership development programs at these different organizations. And I think when I first started doing that, I was like, oh, well, managers know that they have a responsibility here. No, they don't. Like, they don't. They don't think about it that way. And so pretty quickly after that, I started really changing that narrative a little bit. So I always had a kickoff session for the people that were in those programs, but then I had a kickoff session for the managers as well. And it wasn't just like, here's what we're going to talk about with your first development program. It was like, here's your responsibilities of having somebody in this program. And here's what this looks like. And here's how we're going to keep you up to date on what's going on in the program. We might even give you some guidance in some areas you might want to have some conversations with them. Go nuts. Like, if you don't need those questions or those areas of focus, great. If you want those, great. So, I mean, we were literally sending out like every other month or after every session an email to the leaders to let them know, like, what did we talk about? What was the conversation? What are some topics you might be able to talk to your employee about? How could you work this into, or can you guys have the conversation of working this into your day-to-day work? Because that's, of course, where it's really going to happen. That's where the change is going to happen, when people actually are doing it in their day-to-day work. And so that's a big one for me. So I think it's not just about you're developing that person. You have to make sure that that manager is part of that bigger, broader learning ecosystem, and they've actually take that seriously. And that's hard. It's not an easy one, but I think setting expectations, giving them some tools and resources to be able to do that, and then ensuring that those things are happening a little bit more often. That's a big one, because they're the ones that can make it happen. I can't go back and make them get the experience in their job. Managers and leaders can go back and say, I've got this project that helps Jane do exactly what she wanted to do, or what she's been working on, what she's been focused on. So I'm going to give her this project because I know this is one of the things that she needs to continue to develop and grow. I'm going to coach her and focus and help her as she's going through that process, but give her enough to be able to do what she needs to do to learn from it.
I love that. Honestly, yeah, like simple habits makes a ton of sense to me. And yeah, I don't think it's about overcomplicating with like crazy structures. It's just honestly just simple behaviors that people need to easily understand and remember to do, and then can reinforce often without feeling like they have to remember an entire encyclopedia of best practices. What would you say is the biggest mistake you see in organizations in their manager or leadership development approaches?
Yeah, I mean, when I think they're doing manager and leadership development, especially when they're trying to do this at scale, because a lot of times they are trying to scale these managers up, or really try to make sure that they're scaling a huge portion of the population up at one time. I think there's a couple things they don't do very well, like over indexing on the content, but not really thinking about the behavior. So that's a big one. And really, I think right off the bat, and I see this at a lot of organizations, is what does good leadership look like? So have you even defined that? Do you know what a good leader looks like? It's great to have leadership programs and to try to develop and grow people, but towards what? And what does a good leader look like in the organization? And I think something simple too. So competencies can be a great way to talk about that. Though sometimes competencies have all these behaviors under them. And then when you're talking about it, there's 25 things now that you need to potentially understand to be able to be a really good leader at whatever level you're at, whether you're at the manager, director, VP, and above level. Okay, that's not digestible. So how do you have a really digestible, thoughtful way, whether it's a leadership framework, something that helps people understand what good leadership looks like? If you aren't, again, it's like everything that we do. You define expectations, you set those, and then you adjust them and help guide people as they're going through it. That's the same thing for leadership. And so if
Right.
we're going to help grow leaders, we have to know what good looks like. So you have to do that. And if you don't have that going on in an organization, that's a big one. I think you have to involve senior leaders in reinforcing expectations. So, I mean, they have to be part of it. Like, if people don't think that the senior leaders care about this, or that they are exhibiting those behaviors themselves, that's a big one. Like, if that's not happening, again, if you're saying these are the important leadership behaviors, but we're seeing bad behavior from up above in the organization, well, it doesn't matter. Like, no matter what we're teaching people in that class, they're going to literally go out of it and say, hey, well, executives don't do this. I was in a session this morning at Sherm, and it was a little bit of what this person that was presenting her name's Lauren Cohen. She's one of my favorite people here in the St. Louis area too. And she was talking about this concept that she has. And part of it, what she's saying was like, hey, this is what really good leadership looks like, or this is what our expectations are. It has to show all the way through from a cultural perspective. She actually pulled up this little quote that she had from one of the trainings that she did. And she said, the person was like, this class was great. I learned a whole lot from it, but I'm a little confused because when I look up, I don't see them exhibiting these behaviors.
Right. Yeah. But you lose all credibility, right? Like everyone's like this. It's just all talk, right?
It's all talk. So I think that's a big one. I mean, the other one that I would say, and I think we kind of briefly touched on this, well, you've got to develop managers when they're becoming new leaders. So if they're newly promoted, newly hired into the organization, like that, as you mentioned earlier, Vince, is a whole brand new spanking role. Like when you're a great salesperson or a great accountant, or a great engineer, that does not mean that you have the same skill set to be a great leader. You are actually learning a brand spanking new job. So if we are not doing enough to kind of develop and grow those people right off the bat, you don't have to teach them everything. You can't teach them everything all the way in the first year. Give them the basics, help them understand a lot of the most key important things like giving feedback, coaching individuals, having hard conversations, like help them know and understand some of those things. If you don't, then you're going to wonder why 3 or 4 years in, you've got managers that aren't having the conversations. Their teams aren't performing well. They're not meeting the expectations that you have. Well, look, you didn't tell them how to be a leader. Those are some big ones for me when I think of like big mistakes that organizations make when it comes to management and especially scaling up management.
I bet, in the manager sort of development programs you've led in the past, it must have had a lot of different elements to it. And you would have run sort of surveys and asked questions about the participants to understand what moved the needle the most. Did you see any trends on the type of experience or lever or like tactic you use that seemed to always get an outsized sort of response around its impact from the participants themselves?
That's a great one. So, I mean, I think for a good leadership development program, there's some balance, in my opinion. Like, there needs to be probably a great facilitator that's really owning and managing and administering that program, but also is a really good leader and a good learner, someone who can really help the individuals in that program know and learn better. There's just most people that I've worked with, there's something about someone that's a really good program administrator who really cares about those people, wants to see them grow, is patient, and that's wonderful. So part of it is, do you have a good administrator who is probably facilitating some of the things that go on in those programs? I think the second piece is that administrator can't be everything on every topic. So that's where I do like to bring in other organizations, outside vendors to say, hey, especially if they're experts on that topic, let's bring them in and make sure that they're part of it, especially if there's a specific focus that we want. Like there's someone I used to use all the time when it came to speaking. There was a group here in St. Louis that was called CocoBiz. It was the Center of Creative Arts, but it was their business arm. And so they used artists to help teach people how to tell better stories. And that was amazing. And I really, really enjoyed that. That was definitely something that people loved because it was experiential. I think in any of those types of programs, the experiential piece, they a lot of times get a lot out of that. I think one of the biggest pieces, though, is bringing those experts in from the organization. I think pretty consistently, almost in any single program that I've been in, when you bring in like a panel of leaders or you bring a leader in and they can share a little bit more of their story, their guidance, their advice, the big thing, the mistakes they've made and where they've failed, that one really resonates with people. It's like, oh, these people aren't perfect. They've made mistakes. They've done dumb things in their life. They've made decisions that probably weren't the best or that they would have not made this time where they are in their life now. So I think that's a big one. It's kind of trying to find some balance in here, but I think experiential pieces, people really, really enjoy that. You've got to connect it to the why, though. You have to connect it to why they're having this experience. And then I think hearing from those leaders in the organization, because you don't get a chance very often to sit down with a VP or a C-suite person and say, like, how did you get where you are? And like, what did you struggle with when you became a VP for the first time? And to hear them being so honest and candid and open about that, that always, I think, gets the highest markings anytime that we're looking at things in leadership programs, is hearing from those leaders in those organizations and learning from them and being able to ask them the hard questions.
Got it. Yeah, which totally resonates with my experience also. I would love to like look forward, right? There's a lot of discussions nowadays around how the role of manager is changing when the workforce is not just humans anymore. There are humans and bots, and there's all these conversations happening. I'd be curious to hear from you around what do you think are the parts of the manager role that would still remain consistent, and what parts of the role manager would really change to reshape the role of the manager, let's say in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So when I think about that, there's certain pieces that aren't going to change to me. And both pieces that aren't going to change is being able to show up those human-centric leadership capabilities we were talking about, like having emotional intelligence, being able to have a hard conversation with someone, being able to give good feedback, being able to coach somebody, have great development conversations with people. Those things can't and shouldn't change. Like if you're a good leader, again, just a good leader, but a great leader, like those things shouldn't change. And AI isn't going to change those things because AI can't really change those things. So that's got to stay. I do think and hope with AI that if it can do all the things that we think it can do, that it can really take a lot of the administrative burden off of managers. That is, I mean, I don't know about you, Vince. Like, so for me, like the thing I hear the most from managers when they like, why am I not taking care of my people? Why am I not leading the way that I should is purely time. Are you hearing that similarly?
I definitely hear managers have a lot of demand on things and they have to do some of their own work as well. So time is definitely a big reason I hear.
Yeah, it's the time. It's the idea of being a player coach. I
Yeah,
think a lot of managers
for
are a player
sure.
coach
Yeah.
in especially these days. So I think that is a big one. And so I don't think those should change. I am kind of excited about, well, what does AI mean for this? But I think there's some challenges that come with that too, because maybe it can take away some of that administrative work. Great. But I think what's going to be interesting in the future is that you're not going to just be leading people. I think, and I heard this term the other day and I kind of liked it. You're also going to be leading digital labor.
Right.
So when you think about AI tools, agents, bots, we often talk about when you want to, look at changing or growing your department, do you want to build, buy, or borrow? But really it's turning into, do you want to build, buy, borrow, or bot? like,
Right. Yeah.
like, well, what is this going to look like in the future?
Yeah.
So I think we're going to have to educate and help people get there because that's new. Like one, that's again, I think a great leader really understands like role clarity and task allocation and quality control and how to escalate things and accountability and how do things get coordinated on their team. Like that's the hallmark of a really great leader. Now you're adding this whole nother piece in there. There is this again, this digital labor. It doesn't change that work in that sense, but how that's going to be done is drastically different. Who knows what's coming in the future? We only know what's starting to happen right now. Bots might be like a thing of the past in like 2 years from now. So how are you going to manage the labor you control? Whether that is, again, your wonderful team, human team that you have, but also potentially this digital labor that you're going to have it on top of it. So I think how do you balance all of that? And I don't know that anyone really truly has the answer for that yet.
You know how for a long time, people through years of experience of being an individual contributor learn the pattern recognition to look at outputs and have a view on, okay, this is good, this is not good. Like these are reasons why, right? X is better than Y and so on. I suspect we'll need a different way for people to master that pattern recognition and judgment faster. In the world with lots of digital labor, you are getting inundated with outputs. I think the rate at which you have to assess, evaluate, and like judge outputs is sort of like exponentially increasing. So people need to be much better at that. And I suspect we'll need to like actively develop people's acumen on that front.
100% Vince, because I think the way that we look at management and leadership right now in today's day and age is like, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's like that funnel up to that one person that's that decision maker. That's not going to work that way forever. Not in this day and age, not where we're going in the future, not with this digital labor. That's not going to be as easy to just say that, hey, you are the person that's the end all be all decision maker on kind of everything. Like you can't lead like that. And even if you could lead like that, and some people were still leading in that command and control style, you are not going to be able to lead like that in the future. It's not going to be possible. Things are too complicated. They're too ambiguous. You're not going to have AI and bots and all of this involved in it. That idea of like that command and control, which has been dying for a while, it's really going to die in the next couple of years, especially as AI gets more involved in what work looks like, because you can't do it that way anymore.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Well, Ryan, thanks so much for joining and sharing. You've really sort of honed through writing your book. I'm so excited for people to start reading it. and so excited for me to also get a copy and read it. So thank you so much, and I look forward to having more conversations like this going forward.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks for having me on, Vince. Great
Okay.
conversation.